What if the people who should love you most told you that your place in the family was nothing but pity? Imagine sitting at Sunday brunch, coffee in hand, hearing your own mother smirk and say, "You're lucky we even include you." Has anyone ever cut you down like that? If you've lived through a moment like this or witnessed one, share it in the comments. And let me know if you've been watching since the very beginning. I never imagined that a Sunday brunch could split my life in two. Yet there I was, sitting at a polished marble table at Maison Bleu, Boston's newest French bistro where appearances mattered more than the food, staring at my family as if they were strangers I had known all my life. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, scattering across crystal glasses filled with mimosas, catching the gleam of my mother's pearls. Everything around me shimmered with wealth and poise. Inside, though, I felt a storm pressing against my ribcage. I am Charlotte Wilson, 35 years old. I've built a career in software development, earned my way into a senior position, and created a life of independence in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Yet, on this particular Sunday, none of that seemed to matter. To them, my mother Elaine, my father Richard, and my brother Nathan, I was not Charlotte the professional, Charlotte the achiever, or Charlotte, the woman who had managed their entire financial infrastructure for nearly a decade. I was simply the difficult daughter, the one they tolerated, the one they pitied. Elaine sat across from me in her ivory linen dress, the kind that cost more than most people's rent, her freshly highlighted blonde hair perfectly in place. My father, in his navy-tailored suit, scrolled absently on his phone, the way he always did when life got too real. And then there was Nathan, my brother, expensive clothes hanging loosely from his shoulders, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, his hands trembling as he checked his phone under the table. Only I knew why. Only I had seen the casino withdrawals stacking up like storm clouds on the family's accounts. The waiter approached with a polite smile. "Mimosas for the table?" my father declared, not bothering to ask what I wanted. "Sparkling water with lemon," I said quietly, "and coffee." My mother sighed audibly. Always the difficult one. That was Elaine's specialty, tiny barbs, disguised as offhand remarks, sharpened by decades of use. Around us, real families laughed. A father leaned in to listen to his teenage daughter. An elderly couple held hands across their table. For them, brunch was a ritual of love. For me, it was a performance. Another carefully staged tableau for my mother's social circle. When our food arrived, the script played out as it always did. My avocado toast was mocked as predictable, while Nathan's steak and eggs, despite his hangover, was praised as hearty and masculine. My father asked about my programming job, his eyes never leaving his watch. I corrected him gently. Software development. My team just launched a financial security platform that's already been adopted by 3 major banks. How nice, my mother interrupted smoothly. But Nathan just closed a $40 million development deal. I knew the deal had fallen apart weeks ago. I had seen the numbers. But I also knew my role here. To smile, nod, and stay silent while Nathan's fictions were gilded into family legend. The conversation spiraled country club gossip, digs about my single status, references to friends' third marriages as though they were achievements. My mother announced the upcoming cabin renovation party as if it were a royal decree. I felt my pulse quicken. The cabin in Vermont wasn't just another property. It was Elise's place, my grandmother's legacy, her library willed specifically to me. That sanctuary of books and memories was now being gutted to make way for Nathan's media room. I was not aware renovations had been approved, I said carefully. Legal technicality? My father dismissed. Your grandmother was sentimental. That musty old room with all those books nobody reads, my mother chimed in. It's becoming something useful. For entertaining clients. My chest tightened. They knew what that library meant to me. They simply didn't care. I stayed composed, even when Nathan cleared his throat and tried to push his luck. I might need some adjustments to my access levels, Char. For business purposes. His voice wavered. I knew the truth. He wanted higher withdrawal limits for the casino. Before I could respond, the plates were cleared. My mother leaned in then, her pearls catching the sunlight like tiny knives. Her tone softened into that syrupy sweetness I had learned to fear. Charlotte, she said, her lips curling into a smirk. You're lucky we even include you in family matters at all. Pity goes a long way. The restaurant noise blurred into a distant hum. My father's silence, his eyes locked on his phone, was tacit agreement. Nathan gave a nervous laugh. The weight of 3.5 decades pressed down on me, birthdays forgotten, graduations ignored, accomplishments minimized. It all came crashing back with that single line. I placed my coffee cup gently onto the saucer, straightened my napkin across my lap, and looked directly at my mother. "Thank you for your honesty," I said evenly, my voice calm but resonant. She blinked, unprepared. She had expected tears, anger, defense. My composure robbed her of the performance she craved. For once, she looked away first. The rest of brunch slid by in small talk that meant nothing. My father droned about stock market trends. Nathan fidgeted, likely calculating his next bet. My mother critiqued the outfits of strangers, but my role had shifted. I wasn't their daughter seeking approval anymore. I was an observer, cataloging every hypocrisy, every cruelty, every silence. When the bill arrived, my father handed over his platinum card without a glance. I almost laughed. That card, like everything else, ran on the infrastructure I had built. They dismissed me, yet they depended on me for every dollar that moved. The irony was suffocating. Outside, spring sunshine bathed the brick streets of Back Bay. My mother brushed my cheek with a kiss that never touched skin. My father answered a call before we even reached the curb. Nathan leaned closer, his voice low and desperate. "Can you spot me $5,000, just until Friday?" "I'll see what I can do," I lied, already knowing my answer. I walked alone to my car, the warmth of the day at odds with the cold resolve settling in my chest. For 35 years, I had bent myself into shapes small enough to fit into their world. But with one cruel sentence, my mother had given me something I never thought I'd receive: permission. Permission to walk away, permission to stop saving them, permission to choose myself. Back in my Cambridge apartment, I hung my coat, set my keys in the bowl by the door, and sat at my desk. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from clarity. On the screen before me glowed the family's financial dashboard, the empire I had quietly managed for years. Shopping centers, investment portfolios, trust funds, properties, credit accounts. Every detail, every number, every weakness ran through me. I took a deep breath, feeling the silence of my apartment wrap around me like armor. For the first time, the thought formed with perfect precision: if pity is the only reason I'm included, maybe it's time to remove myself from the equation entirely. I opened a secure folder, began documenting every account, every transaction, every violation of Elise's will. Midnight ticked closer. My phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications I ignored. Somewhere in Vermont, contractors prepared to demolish a library meant for me. Somewhere in Connecticut, casinos waited for Nathan's next desperate withdrawal. Somewhere in Boston, Elaine believed she had cut me down with a smirk, but she had miscalculated, because in that moment, I wasn't broken. I was planning, and when the time came, they would realize the person they dismissed as difficult was the one holding all the strings. Resolution, transition, cliffhanger. That night, as I closed the file and powered down my laptop, one thought echoed louder than any insult. This is not revenge, this is liberation. Yet deep down I knew digging into old wounds has a cost. The past doesn't stay buried forever, and the ghosts of Fairfield were already stirring. If you want to understand why a single sentence at brunch could cut so deep, you'd have to travel back with me. Back to Fairfield, Connecticut, to a house that looked like perfection from the street. A 4-bedroom colonial, white clapboard with navy shutters, a manicured lawn trimmed as sharp as a military haircut, and a heated pool in the backyard. To outsiders, the Wilsons had everything: money, charm, a place in every charity, gala, and country club. Inside those walls, though, love was measured in comparison, approval rationed like scarce currency, and silence stretched thicker than the New England humidity in July. I was a quiet child with a loud mind. My bedroom, painted pale blue against my protests for green, became both sanctuary and prison. It was where I stacked books in uneven towers, where I scribbled in notebooks late into the night, where I learned that achievement was the only language my parents understood. Straight A's, honor societies, debate team captain, I gathered medals like armor. But no matter how bright I shined, their eyes slid past me toward Nathan. Nathan, my older brother by 3 years, was average in every measurable way. Average grades, average talent, average ambition. But he had what my parents prized above all else: charm. At baseball games, my mother Elaine clapped until her pearls rattled, her smile wide even when he struck out. He has presence, she told anyone who would listen. People gravitate toward Nathan. My father Richard nodded along, repeating the mantra. He just needs encouragement. Charlotte doesn't, she's naturally gifted. It was meant as reassurance, but to me it was a backhand that stung for years. Being naturally gifted became their excuse to withhold affection, to deny acknowledgement, to treat my success as inevitable rather than earned. I remember my high school graduation as though it's branded into my skin. I stood at the podium as valedictorian, delivering a speech about perseverance, about chasing dreams, about how our futures were unwritten. Applause roared in my ears, but when I glanced at my family, my father was bent over his BlackBerry, scrolling through emails. My mother whispered to a friend that my dress looked department store. Nathan slouched in his chair, barely pretending to listen. I smiled through it all, but that night, when the house was asleep, I curled on my bed and cried quietly into the pale blue walls. The only person who ever saw me fully was Elise, my grandmother. She wasn't glamorous like Elaine or obsessed with deals like Richard. She loved books, long walks along Lake Champlain, and strong tea with honey. The family cabin in Vermont was her refuge, and by extension, mine. Summers there were the only time I felt like myself. Elise would hand me a novel and say, "This is yours, Charlotte. Stories can be armor too." She built that library with her own hands, oak shelves, leather-bound spines, a window seat that caught the morning light. "This is your place," she whispered one night as I fell asleep curled with a book. When Elise died, she left the cabin equally to her children and grandchildren, but she wrote one line just for me. "The library is for Charlotte's use, for her lifetime. It is to remain intact, a place of learning and reflection." That single sentence became my inheritance of love in a family that trafficked in cold assets. But even Elise's devotion couldn't shield me from the constant reminders of where I stood. I overheard my mother once, on Thanksgiving when I was 12, telling her sister on the phone, "Of course Charlotte's smart, but she lacks social graces. Nathan has that natural magnetism people adore." I stopped entering rooms without knocking after that, afraid of what else I might hear. By the time I earned a full scholarship to MIT for computer science, I thought maybe finally they would look at me with pride. Instead, my father's first words were, "We could have paid. You didn't need to make it about money." As if my independence diminished him. Meanwhile, Nathan coasted into Boston College with mediocre grades, parents footing every bill including a glossy off-campus apartment. At MIT, I found myself. I discovered the language of algorithms, the thrill of solving puzzles no one else could crack. For a class project, I built a predictive stock algorithm. To my surprise, it worked and worked well. By the end of senior year, I had turned a modest scholarship stipend into a small but growing investment portfolio. Ironically, my financial acumen only bound me tighter to the family I longed to escape. When Nathan lost $40,000 in a single weekend trading penny stocks, my father didn't scold him. He came to me. "Keep an eye on things," he said vaguely, sliding the wreckage across my desk. That vague request became the leash I never escaped. I digitized accounts, set up secure payment systems, created redundancies only I understood. At first it was pride I could prove my worth, but slowly it became entrapment. By my late 20s, I was the unacknowledged CFO of Wilson Enterprises, operating in the shadows, the competent daughter they relied on but never respected. And yet, I kept coming back. Holidays, birthdays, dinners at that suffocating Fairfield house. A stubborn hope anchored me that one day, they'd see me. That one day, they'd clap for me the way they clapped for Nathan striking out in the 9th inning. That hope was a slow poison, one I didn't recognize until much later. In Cambridge, I built a different life. My apartment was modest but mine. 2 bedrooms, industrial furnishings, walls lined with books like Elise's Library Reborn. Friends like Sophia and Jordan filled my weekends with wine, laughter, and honesty. With them, I felt chosen. With my family, I felt tolerated. Still, I answered their calls. I managed their accounts. I made excuses for Nathan's jittery behavior and endless emergencies. I told myself I was keeping the peace. But the truth? I was afraid. Afraid of cutting the final thread. Afraid of being cast out completely. And then came the brunch. That moment in Boston wasn't just cruelty, it was culmination. 35 years of being sidelined, minimized, dismissed. 35 years of being the daughter who was lucky to be included. Sitting there, sunlight bouncing off pearls and crystal, I finally saw the truth as stark as a line of code. They would never see me. Not as I was. Not as I am. The cabin renovation, the financial lies, the smirk at brunch, they were all connected. They weren't just pushing me aside. They were erasing me. Resolution. Transition cliffhanger to Chapter 3. That night, back in my Cambridge apartment, I sat in the glow of my laptop and pulled up the family's financial web. Lines of accounts, trusts, credit cards, and properties formed a network only I could navigate. For years, I had protected them from their own recklessness. For years, I had been the invisible scaffolding holding their empire upright. But scaffolding can be pulled away. And as my cursor hovered over their accounts, a startling thought burned bright in my chest. What happens if I stop protecting them? In the quiet glow of my Cambridge apartment, I stared at the screen that had become both my prison and my weapon. The family's financial dashboard filled the monitor, a labyrinth of accounts, properties, credit lines, and investments. I had built this network brick by digital brick, smoothing over my father's sloppy delegations, Nathan's recklessness, my mother's lavish spending. They thought of me as the difficult one. What they didn't realize was that every dollar they spent, every property they flaunted, every illusion of stability they paraded to the world ran through me. The irony was suffocating. They dismissed my career as Charlotte's little computer job, even while entrusting me with the entire Wilson empire. Richard had always demanded convenience. Passwords had to be short. Access had to be simple. "I don't want to be locked out of my own accounts," he'd grumbled. I warned him simplicity invites disaster. He waved me off, signing documents he never read, authorizing systems he didn't understand. In his arrogance, he made me the sole administrator, the master keyholder of it all. Now that key burned in my pocket. I scrolled through the accounts, documenting every red flag. Nathan had siphoned nearly $200,000 over the past year alone, disguised as business expenses. The withdrawals came from ATMs near Mohegan Sun, a casino only 90 minutes from Fairfield. His gambling wasn't a hobby, it was an addiction with teeth. And yet, my parents remained blissfully oblivious, writing his jittery mood swings off as stress from the divorce or pressure at the firm. The truth was uglier. Nathan wasn't running the development projects Richard bragged about at brunch. Junior employees carried his workload while Nathan bet away the family's fortune one weekend at a time. I had the statements, the timestamps, the proof, and still, they asked me to hand it all over. To surrender control to Nathan's new financial advisor from Goldman Sachs. I almost laughed when my mother said that. No professional in the world would touch Nathan's accounts. Not with debts bleeding like open wounds. But they didn't care about truth. They cared about appearances. If Nathan looked successful, then Elaine could still hold her head high at the country club luncheons. Then there was the cabin. Elise's cabin. Elise's library. The one place that had ever felt like mine. Plans were already drafted. Demolition of the library. Expansion of a media room for entertaining clients. New construction scheduled for July. They hadn't consulted me. They hadn't even told me. I had discovered it by accident while cross-checking property management expenses. That discovery hit harder than the brunch insult. The library was more than oak shelves and dusty books. It was Elise's voice whispering, "This is your place." To tear it down wasn't just renovation. It was erasure. I leaned back in my chair, my reflection faint in the darkened window. My face looked older than I, felt tired from years of pretending indifference. I realized then that my silence had been their greatest weapon. Every time I stayed quiet, they rewrote the narrative. Charlotte is lucky to be included. Charlotte complicates things. Charlotte doesn't need encouragement. Silence had protected them. And I was done being silent. I needed help, though. Not just legal help, someone who understood how families like mine operated, how money and manipulation twined together like ivy strangling a tree. I reached for my phone and scrolled to Jordan's number. He picked up on the second ring. Char, it's late. You okay? I need a referral, I said without preamble. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. Family financial disputes, property rights, someone who won't back down. There was a pause. Jordan exhaled slowly. Vanessa Hargrove. She handled my sister's divorce. Her ex tried to bury her under litigation. Vanessa tore him apart without blinking. She's ruthless? She's fair. But she doesn't scare easy. I'll text you her contact. As it rated as noted. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't in years. The first tremor of power shifting back to me. The next morning, I met Sophia for coffee at a corner cafe near Kendall Square. She took one look at me and frowned. You didn't sleep. Not much. I stirred my coffee, watching cream swirl like smoke. Do you ever feel like your entire childhood was designed to make you doubt yourself? Sophia's expression softened. Every time I go home for the holidays, families are great at disguising cruelty as tradition. She leaned forward. What happened? I told her everything, the brunch, the renovations, the accounts, Nathan's gambling. When I finished, Sophia sat back, eyes sharp. So, what now? I hesitated, then said it out loud for the first time. I think I'm done saving them. Saying it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Terrifying, exhilarating, inevitable. The next few days blurred into meticulous preparation. I combed through every account, saving encrypted backups. I printed Elise's will, highlighting the clause about the library. I photographed the cabin renovation plans. I documented every transaction that proved Nathan's addiction. I organized files into neat digital folders labeled like battle plans, cabin, trusts, credit lines, gambling evidence. And through it all, the same thought pulsed in my mind. They think I'm powerless. They think I'll stay quiet. They have no idea I'm the one holding the switch. Still, fear lingered. These weren't strangers I was about to confront. They were my parents. My brother. People I had spent a lifetime trying to please. The guilt rose like bile whenever I imagined my mother's wounded sigh, my father's clipped disappointment, Nathan's desperate pleas. Dr. Reed's voice echoed in my memory from a session months earlier. Guilt isn't always a sign you're doing wrong. Sometimes it's proof you're breaking an unhealthy pattern. By Friday night, my plan was clear. Step 1. Secure legal counsel. Step 2. Freeze the bleeding, cut off Nathan's lifelines. Step 3. Protect Elise's library at all costs. I sat again before the glowing dashboard, fingers poised over the keyboard. My heart pounded as if it already knew what I was about to do. This wasn't just numbers and accounts. This was leverage. This was history. This was every insult, every dismissal, every time I had been told I was lucky to be tolerated. I whispered to the empty room. Let's see how they function without their safety net. Resolution. Transition, cliffhanger to Chapter 4. That night, I drafted the first email to Vanessa, attaching files labeled confidential. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I clicked, there would be no going back. Outside, rain tapped against the window, steady as a metronome. My phone buzzed Nathan again, begging for money. I didn't answer. Instead, I clicked send. The battle had begun, and in the stillness of my apartment, one truth crystallized. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was moving first. But even as resolve hardened in my chest, a question whispered at the back of my mind. When you finally pull the strings, are you ready for what might unravel? The glow of the laptop felt like stage lights as midnight bled into early morning. For hours, I had been staring at the family's financial dashboard, the empire they believed they controlled, but that, in reality, rested in my hands. My fingers hovered over the keys, trembling not with hesitation but with the weight of inevitability. Every password, every credit line, every automated payment ran through me. And tonight, for the first time in 35 years, I was about to stop carrying them. This wasn't revenge. I told myself that again and again as I opened the first account file. This was survival. For years, I had been the scaffolding propping up a structure built on lies and indulgence. Without me, the cracks would show. Without me, the facade would crumble. And maybe, just maybe, in the rubble, I'd finally find my freedom. I started with the credit cards. 4 primary accounts in my parents' names, 3 in Nathan's names, all set to autopay. For years I had shielded them from late fees and overdraft penalties. Tonight I disabled the automatic payments with a few keystrokes. The cards remained active, but the safety net was gone. From now on, when the bills came due, they would feel the weight of them. Next, the family's investment portfolio. My father bragged about his market instincts at cocktail parties, but the truth was that every trade, every gain, had been filtered through the risk algorithms I wrote. I toggled the settings, locking the accounts behind 2-factor authentication that only I could trigger. The markets would remain untouched until someone proved competent enough to regain access. That someone would not be Nathan. The checking accounts came next. 2 joint accounts tied to household expenses, 1 discretionary account Nathan used like an ATM for his gambling binges. I stripped away overdraft protection, returning them to their raw form. No more safety cushions. When the balance hit 0, the consequences would hit hard. My hands shook, but my mind was crystal clear. For years I had built redundancy after redundancy to protect them. Now I was dismantling the very system I had designed, turning their fortress into a glass house. And it felt liberating. I paused, staring at the property files. The Vermont cabin. Elise's sanctuary. My sanctuary. The renovation permits had been filed without my consent, signed with a casual dismissal of my legal rights. I opened a new document, carefully attaching Elise's will and highlighting the clause protecting the library. Then I composed the email to the family's attorney. Dear Mr. Steinberg, I am writing to formally object to the planned renovations at the Lake Champlain property. As you are aware, I am a co-owner with explicit rights regarding the library. The current plans violate the terms of Elise Wilson's will. Effective immediately, all construction must cease pending legal review. Please advise the contractors and permitting office accordingly. Regards, Charlotte Wilson. I copied the county office, attached the relevant documents, and hit send. My pulse quickened. That single email was more than a legal notice, it was a declaration. I would not let them erase Elise's gift. The last step was the hardest. An email to my parents and Nathan. I stared at the blank message window, fingers hovering, unsure where to begin. After years of silence, what words could capture this moment? Finally, I wrote, I am stepping back from management of all family financial affairs effective immediately. Security protocols have been updated to protect the accounts during this transition. I have also addressed the legal violations regarding the Vermont property. Future communications should be directed through proper legal channels. I will not be available for direct contact at this time. Charlotte. I reread it 3 times. No apology, no explanation, just the truth. Then I clicked send. For a long moment, the apartment was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I sat there, stunned. It was done. The weight I had carried since my 20s of being their unacknowledged financial lifeline lifted, leaving me dizzy. My phone buzzed almost immediately, notifications stacking like falling dominoes. I powered it off, sliding it into a drawer. Let the storm rage outside. I was finally out of reach. I leaned back, closing my eyes. For years, I had mistaken compliance for love. Tonight, I finally understood. Love without respect is just control in disguise. And I was done being controlled. The following morning, the world felt different. Lighter somehow. I brewed coffee, stretching my arms as sunlight poured through the windows. Simple acts, pouring cereal, watering the plant in the corner, felt sacred. For the first time in years, my routines belonged to me. Not dictated by phone calls demanding tech support, or texts asking for quick transfers, or emails filled with passive-aggressive praise for Nathan. By 9 a.m., the storm hit. When I turned my phone on briefly, 17 missed calls and 23 text messages exploded across the screen. Richard. Fix this immediately. Elaine. You're overreacting. We'll talk tonight. Nathan. What the hell did you do? You've ruined everything. I powered the phone off again, smiling faintly. Let them panic. Panic was the natural result of losing the safety net they'd taken for granted. Instead of responding, I dressed deliberately, charcoal blazer, crisp blouse, jeans, and headed downtown to meet Vanessa. She was exactly as Jordan had described. Sharp, composed, eyes like steel. She listened as I outlined everything, flipping through my documentation with practiced efficiency. Your position is strong, she said finally. The cabin's library clause is airtight. And your role as administrator was formally granted. You're within your rights. Her words steadied me. For the first time, someone outside my circle of friends validated what I had always feared was weakness. That my family's treatment of me wasn't just unkind, it was unjust. By afternoon, Vanessa had already filed an emergency injunction halting the cabin renovations. She began drafting letters to the financial institutions, documenting my resignation and Nathan's unauthorized withdrawals. Piece by piece, she built a shield around me, one I had never known I could claim. That evening, alone in my apartment, I performed a ritual of reclamation. I deleted the family calendar from my phone, birthdays and anniversaries I had never truly been part of. I removed framed photos from the living room, replacing them with artwork I loved but had hidden away. Each small act felt like peeling away another layer of obligation. When the phone buzzed again from its drawer, I let it. The silence that followed was more powerful than any argument. Resolution, transition cliffhanger to Chapter 5. As midnight approached, I stood by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. My family would not take this lying down. They would fight back, Richard with intimidation, Elaine with manipulation, Nathan with desperation. I could already feel the storm gathering. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I whispered to the empty room. I've made my move. And deep down, I knew their counterattack was coming. The silence didn't last long. I knew it wouldn't. The morning after I sent my resignation email, the Wilsons mobilized like a wounded animal striking back. I expected anger, maybe desperation. What I didn't expect was how quickly they would turn to intimidation. By 8 a.m., my inbox was flooded with subject lines written in all caps. This is unacceptable. Fix now. You will regret this. My father's tone dripped through every line, the voice of a man who'd built shopping centers and believed he could bulldoze people the same way he bulldozed land. At 9 a.m., Vanessa called. They've already reached out, she said dryly. Richard's attorney threatened immediate legal action if you don't restore access. I laughed. The sound startled even me. On what grounds? None that will hold, she replied. But intimidation is always their first weapon. Expect more. More came faster than I thought. By noon, Elaine had pivoted from scolding emails to carefully crafted voicemails. Her voice oozed with syrupy pain. Charlotte, honey, what you're doing is dangerous. People will talk. You don't want to embarrass the family, do you? She sighed theatrically. The sound of pearls clicking together as she fiddled with her necklace. This isn't you. Call me back and let's fix this before it gets worse. I pressed delete. By 3, Nathan's desperation turned darker. Text after text lit up my phone. You don't understand what you've done. These aren't just credit cards. I owe people who don't wait for late fees. You need to fix this before someone gets hurt. Someone. The implication was clear. When I ignored him, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. But the memory of his trembling hands at brunch made me pause. Against my better judgment, I pressed accept. Charlotte? His voice cracked, raw and jagged. I need 30 grand by tomorrow. Number. You don't get it. His voice rose to a frantic pitch. This isn't about me losing at the tables. These are markers. At the casino. They'll come after me. This is serious. I'm not your bailout, I said evenly, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. I resigned as administrator. Your debts are your problem. You're doing this on purpose, he accused, his words trembling with rage and fear. You disabled the payments just to screw me over. No, Nathan. I disabled them because you're destroying yourself and dragging everyone else with you. His breath came heavy over the line. For a moment I thought I heard the boy he used to be, the brother who once handed me a soda on a summer afternoon. The one Elise swore had a good heart. But that boy was buried beneath years of entitlement and addiction. You're destroying the family, he whispered. No, I replied softly. The family was destroying me. And I ended the call. That evening, Vanessa and I met in her office. The city buzzed outside the tall windows, but inside, the air was still. The weight of strategy pressing between us. They'll escalate, she said. First threats, then public shaming. Elaine will weaponize her social circle. Richard will try to drag you into court. And Nathan, he's volatile. His fear makes him dangerous. I know, I murmured. But I can't keep carrying them. Vanessa studied me, her eyes assessing. You've lived your whole life under their version of reality. It's disorienting to stand outside of it. Remember, guilt isn't evidence you're wrong. It's evidence you're breaking the pattern. Her words lodged in my chest like a compass needle. When I left her office, rain slicked the sidewalks, neon lights reflecting like fractured glass. For the first time, I didn't feel like a runaway child defying her parents. I felt like a general on the eve of war. The next few days were a barrage. Richard's attorney sent 3 formal letters demanding immediate restoration of accounts. Vanessa responded with clinical precision. My client has resigned from administrative duties, provided documentation, and acted within her legal rights. Any attempt to mischaracterize her role will be treated as harassment. Elaine spread her own narrative. Friends of friends whispered back to me, "Your mother says you're having some kind of breakdown. She's telling people you're unstable, that you need rest." I should have been angry. Instead, I almost smiled. That was Elaine's oldest trick. Frame control as concern. Nathan was less subtle. He showed up at my building, pounding on the glass lobby doors until security escorted him away. He left notes sloppy, scrawled pleas that veered into threats. "Help me or you'll regret this. They're not going to let me walk away. You're stronger than me, you can fix this." I shredded them all. At night, though, sleep came fitfully. My mind replayed his voice, raw with fear. These aren't just credit cards. I'd wake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if the line between tough love and abandonment was thinner than I wanted to admit. One night, unable to settle, I called Sophia. "Tell me I'm not a monster," I whispered. "You're not a monster," she said without hesitation. "You're finally putting the oxygen mask on yourself first. They've been taking your air for decades." Her words steadied me. But guilt is a stubborn shadow. By the end of the week, the Wilsons shifted tactics. As Vanessa predicted, the threats gave way to negotiation. An email from Elaine arrived, strikingly uncharacteristic. Perhaps my words at brunch were too harsh. Family disagreements are normal, but they should stay within the family. Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be. Call me, darling. We'll sort out the accounts together. I forwarded it to Vanessa. She replied in 2 words. Classic minimization. Still, the message lingered. Some part of me wanted to believe it was real that Elaine had glimpsed the damage she'd done. But I knew better. Her apology contained no acknowledgement of harm, no admission of cruelty. It was a performance, crafted to reel me back into place. I didn't respond. The storm was far from over. On Saturday, I went grocery shopping, the most ordinary of errands. But as I pushed my cart down the aisle, I caught sight of someone watching me. A man in a leather jacket, unfamiliar, lingering near the end cap of cereal boxes. He wasn't shopping. He was observing. My pulse spiked. Nathan's words rang in my ears. "These aren't people you mess with." I left my cart, walked calmly but quickly to the parking lot, and got into my car. For several minutes, I sat gripping the steering wheel, scanning the mirrors. The man didn't follow. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe paranoia, but maybe not. When I got home, I called Vanessa. "Do you think Nathan's debts could spill over?" "Anything's possible," she said carefully. "I'll add a security consultant to our team. Change your locks. Notify your building management. Document everything." Her calm tone steadied me, but dread pooled in my stomach. This was bigger than family drama now. This was danger, resolution, transition, cliffhanger, to Chapter 6. That night, as rain pattered against the windows, I sat in the dark of my apartment. My phone vibrated again, Nathan, leaving yet another voicemail I wouldn't hear. My parents, drafting their next scheme. Strangers, maybe watching from aisles in grocery stores. The Wilson empire was unraveling, and for the first time, I wasn't holding it together. But as fear crept in, a sharper truth cut through it. Masks were beginning to slip, and when they finally fell, I wasn't sure what I'd see beneath them. I used to believe my family's power was indestructible. To Fairfield society, the Wilsons were untouchable. The successful businessman, the dazzling socialite, the charming son, and the brilliant but invisible daughter. For decades, they played their roles so perfectly that no one noticed the cracks beneath the surface. But once I pulled away, once I stopped holding the scaffolding together, those cracks widened into fractures. And when the mask finally began to slip, the truth was uglier than I had ever imagined. The first signs came quietly. A friend of Elaine's, someone I'd known since childhood, texted me one afternoon. "Your mom didn't look herself at the gala. She seemed distracted." Distracted was polite code. Elaine lived for galas, for being photographed under chandeliers, her pearls gleaming under the flashbulbs. To be distracted meant her carefully curated image was slipping. The next blow came a week later. A colleague pulled me aside after a fintech conference. "Your father was supposed to present on real estate trends," she whispered. "He canceled at the last minute. People are talking." I nodded, feigning neutrality. Inside, my chest tightened. Richard Wilson never missed an opportunity to showcase himself. If he was retreating from the spotlight, it was because his empire was crumbling, and crumble it did. Vanessa kept me updated like a general delivering intelligence reports. Nathan's accounts were in chaos, creditors circling, debts piling. His Mercedes was repossessed after 3 missed payments. His condo listed for sale. Richard's company hemorrhaged money, unable to function without my oversight. Vendors complained of unpaid invoices. Investors pulled back, spooked by whispers of instability. Meanwhile, Elaine felt the sting of social exile. Her country club membership was suspended after a late payment. A humiliation she tried to spin as a temporary clerical error. She resigned from 2 charity boards, citing family priorities. Though everyone knew the truth, she couldn't maintain the expected donation levels without my quiet transfers propping her up. The masks were slipping, and for once, I wasn't the one holding them in place. But even as their facades cracked, they fought to keep the illusion alive. Elaine sent another email, this one dripping with faux humility. "Perhaps I was too harsh at brunch. Families fight, but blood is thicker than water. We can fix this together." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. There it was again, the refusal to acknowledge harm, the pivot toward control. Families fight. Translation: your pain is normal. Your boundaries are selfish. Blood is thicker than water. Translation: no matter how cruel we are, you owe us loyalty. I forwarded the message to Vanessa. Her reply was one word: predictable. The community whispers grew louder. Friends of friends began sending me fragments. Elaine telling people I was having a breakdown. Richard painting me as ungrateful. Nathan spinning tales of betrayal to cover his addiction. Their narratives clashed, inconsistent, desperate. And for the first time, people noticed. At a cafe one morning, an acquaintance leaned across the table, lowering her voice. "Charlotte, I don't know what's happening with your family, but I want you to know I see you. I've seen how they treat you for years." Her words startled me. For decades, I thought no one saw. That I was invisible. My suffering hidden behind manicured lawns and holiday cards. But maybe people had noticed. Maybe they just hadn't known what to say. Then came the cabin. Vanessa called me late on a Tuesday, her tone clipped. "They tried to sell the Vermont property," she said. My blood ran cold. "Without my signature?" "Correct. They initiated inquiries with buyers, hoping to pressure you. The town clerk called me directly. They can't move forward legally without your consent, but this is a clear attempt to sidestep your rights." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The cabin wasn't just real estate, it was Elise's legacy, my inheritance of love in a family that gave me none. To sell it behind my back was more than deceit. "File whatever you need to," I said finally, my voice steady but trembling underneath. "They can't erase me. Not this time." I already have, Vanessa assured. Consider the sale blocked. But Charlotte. Her tone softened. Prepare yourself. They're getting desperate. And desperate they were, Richard called once, his voice sharp with command. This charade ends now. You're damaging the family. Do you want that on your conscience? I almost laughed. Do you mean the family you claim I should be grateful to be part of? Or the one that drains me dry while pretending I don't exist? His silence was louder than any words. Then he hung up. Elaine's tactics grew subtler. She began showing up at places she knew I'd be: lectures, fundraisers, even a charity event I attended with Sophia. She cornered me near the restrooms, her smile brittle. You look thin, she murmured, her favorite criticism disguised as concern. Are you eating properly? I'm well, thank you, I replied coolly. This separation has gone on long enough, she pressed, lowering her voice. People are talking. It reflects poorly on us all. There it was. Not love. Not regret. Appearances. Always appearances. I'm not erasing history, I told her quietly. I'm honoring it by responding to it. This distance isn't punishment. Her eyes narrowed, her mask slipping for just a second. You always were difficult. No, I said, my voice clear. I was always clear. That clarity just didn't serve you. I walked away, leaving her clutching her champagne glass like a weapon she could no longer use. But even as their masks fell, new ones threatened to take their place. Rumors swirled about Nathan joining a recovery program, about Richard downsizing the company, about Elaine retreating from the spotlight, yet I knew better than to trust whispers. For my family, image was always camouflage. The truth would reveal itself in time, and time was no longer on their side. Resolution transition cliffhanger to Chapter 7. One evening, sitting in my New Hampshire cottage, the one I'd quietly purchased with my share of the cabin's settlement, I opened my journal and wrote, "They're unraveling." But unraveling isn't the same as changing. The thought chilled me, because if masks were falling, what lay beneath might be even darker, and as the phone buzzed with yet another unknown number, I couldn't help but wonder, was Nathan finally ready to face himself? Or was this just another mask waiting to crack? The voicemail came on a gray afternoon in late September. I almost deleted it without listening, expecting another round of threats or manipulations. But something in the silence that followed the automated new message received made me pause. I pressed play. Charlotte, it's me. I don't know if you'll even listen to this, but I need to say it. I'm in Gamblers Anonymous. 6 months sober. I know I've said it before, but this time it's different. I want you to see it. No money, no tricks, just me, please. It was Nathan's voice, but not the voice I knew, the swaggering, careless older brother who'd been shielded his whole life. This voice was stripped raw, unvarnished. For the first time in decades, it carried weight. I sat at my kitchen table in the New Hampshire cottage I had recently purchased, a modest place, wood-paneled, with wide windows overlooking the lake. Outside, autumn had painted the trees in fiery reds and golds. The cottage smelled of pine and paper, my books already stacked in every corner. Elise's legacy living on through me. Nathan's message echoed through the room. I thought of the boy he had been laughing as he pushed me into the pool, sneaking cookies into my room at night, telling me once, when Elise wasn't listening, that I was the smartest person he knew. That boy had been lost long ago. But maybe he was trying to find his way back. Still, hope was a dangerous drug. I had to be careful. 2 weeks later, I agreed to meet him at Vanessa's office, under strict conditions. No parents, no demands, just a conversation, with Vanessa present as witness. When I walked into the conference room, I almost didn't recognize him. Nathan's expensive suits were gone, replaced by off-the-rack business casual. His once pristine watch was missing, pawned or repossessed. His hair was longer, less styled, streaks of gray creeping in. But the biggest change was in his eyes. They no longer darted with entitlement. They looked tired, honest. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. I nodded, taking the seat across from him. Vanessa sat at the head of the table, her legal pad ready. Nathan reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, a small bronze coin. "A 6-month chip," he explained. "Not my first attempt, but the first one that's sticking." I studied the coin, then his face. "Why now?" "Because everything collapsed," he admitted. When you pulled the plug, I couldn't pretend anymore. Dad had to face the company was over-leveraged. Mom had to face that her image was built on quicksand. And me? I had to admit I wasn't unlucky. I was an addict. His words hit me like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But the scars ran deep. For 30 minutes, Nathan spoke. Not the evasive half-truths I'd grown accustomed to, but unvarnished confessions. How he'd chased the high of winning, how shame drove him deeper when he lost, how he lied so easily he sometimes forgot the truth himself. I'm not here to ask for money, he said, his voice steady now. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I just thought you deserved to know. What you did, forcing us to face the consequences, it saved me. Even if I hated you for it at first. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Vanessa's pen scratched faintly across her notepad, but she didn't interrupt. You always were the strong one, Char, Nathan continued. I just never understood that your kind of strength was the one that mattered. The words pierced me. Unexpected and sharp. For decades, I'd been painted as difficult, cold, too logical. Now, sitting across from the brother who had once eclipsed me in our parents' eyes, I heard the truth I had longed for, not from Richard, not from Elaine, but from the sibling who had walked beside me, however crooked the path. I didn't cry, I didn't forgive. But I felt something shift. A door opening, just a crack. We ended the meeting without promises. I told him I would consider future contact if his recovery remained consistent. He nodded, not pressing, as if he finally understood boundaries weren't obstacles but lifelines. That night, back at the cottage, I replayed the conversation in my head. Elisa's library would never return, but perhaps something else could grow in its place. A sliver of connection, fragile and real. Meanwhile, my parents clung desperately to their illusions. When they learned I had met with Nathan, they pounced. Richard sent a formal letter outlining a family reunification plan, which was nothing more than a veiled demand that I resume financial management and withdraw legal objections to the cabin. Elaine left a voicemail dripping with faux concern. Now that tempers have cooled, darling, we can put this behind us. We miss you. I forwarded both to Vanessa. They haven't changed, she observed. Not yet, and she was right. Where Nathan confronted his reflection, Richard and Elaine polished their masks, hoping no one would notice the cracks. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. Therapy with Dr. Reed shifted from crisis management to deeper healing. We unearthed old wounds, examined the roots of my self-worth, peeled back decades of conditioning. Healing isn't linear, Dr. Reed reminded me when guilt surged. There will be days when you long for approval, days when you wonder if you've been too harsh. That's not failure. That's recovery. I established rituals that anchored me. Morning coffee brewed slowly, walks along the lake, pottery classes where clay stained my hands in ways numbers never could. I even started dating casually, no longer paralyzed by the thought of family interrogations. Each small act was an act of reclamation. At work, freed from constant interruptions, I flourished. I completed projects ahead of schedule, earned a promotion to Director of Financial Security Systems, and finally agreed to speak at a fintech conference. The irony wasn't lost on me. The skills my family had mocked were the very ones driving me forward. Nathan, too, slowly rebuilt. Word reached me through mutual acquaintances. He had taken a modest job at an insurance company, far below his old executive title but steady, accountable. He lived in a small studio apartment, within his means for the first time in his life. A month later, we met for coffee at a quiet cafe in Boston. He looked healthier, clearer eyes, steadier hands. I dream about gambling almost every night, he confessed, stirring his coffee absently. My therapist says it's normal. Neural pathways take years to change. What helps when the urge comes? I asked, remembering the consequences, not just the money, who I became. The lies, the manipulation, the person I don't ever want to be again. His honesty startled me. It was fragile, but it was real. And for the first time, I felt the faintest thread of respect weaving between us. But I kept my boundaries firm. No financial ties, no rescuing, no pretending things were fine. Our connection was cautious, measured, on my terms. Meanwhile, my parents remained unmoved. I encountered Elaine at a mutual friend's wedding. She approached, champagne in hand, her smile sharp. This estrangement reflects poorly, Charlotte, she whispered, her eyes darting around the room. People are talking. I'm not estranged, I corrected calmly. I'm setting boundaries. Mutual respect is the condition for closeness. Her face faltered, but only briefly. You always were difficult, she sighed, retreating to her circle of admirers. I watched her go, a pang of sadness stirring in my chest. Not for her approval, but for the realization that she might never change. Still, something had shifted. For decades, I had been the invisible pillar propping them up. Now I was visible to myself, to my friends, even to Nathan, and with each day that passed, I felt myself stepping into a new life, one not defined by pity or control, but by choice. Resolution, transition, cliffhanger to Chapter 8. One crisp autumn evening, I sat on the dock of my cottage, journal in hand, the lake reflecting streaks of crimson and gold. I wrote, "Healing isn't about going back, it's about building forward." For the first time, I believed it. But even as I closed the journal, I knew one final test remained. My parents would not surrender quietly, and the question lingered like the chill in the air. When they made their last move, would I be ready to stand firm, or would old wounds drag me back? 2 years after that brunch at Maison Bleu, I no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. Not because I had changed into someone new, but because I had finally shed the weight of who I had been told to be. My 36th birthday came on a warm summer evening. I sat with friends on the deck of my New Hampshire cottage, laughter rolling across the lake. Sophia brought oysters and champagne. Jordan brought a cake in my favorite flavor, lemon. Not chocolate, not vanilla, not whatever my parents deemed appropriate, but mine. Candles flickered in the breeze, their glow reflecting in eyes that saw me, truly saw me. For the first time, I celebrated on my own terms. But freedom rarely arrives without one last test. At a financial technology conference in Boston, I crossed paths with Richard. He stood in the exhibition hall, silver hair now tinged with neglect, his once commanding presence dulled by exhaustion. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, father and daughter, strangers bound by blood. "You're presenting tomorrow," he said, glancing at my speaker badge. "Yes," I replied. "Panel on Financial Security Infrastructure." Awkward silence stretched. He shifted his weight. "Your brother is doing better. 1 year sober next month." "I know," I said softly. "We speak occasionally." Surprise flickered in his eyes. Nathan's recovery was private, and it struck me that for once, my brother had drawn his own boundary with our parents. "Your mother would like to hear from you," Richard added, his tone carrying the familiar weight of expectation. "That would require acknowledgement of past patterns," I said evenly, "and a commitment to different behavior." He stiffened. "Families disagree, Charlotte. Holding grudges serves no purpose." "This isn't about grudges," I countered quietly. "It's about patterns that harm. Material provisions aren't love, Dad. They're transactions." The words hung heavy between us. Then, like always, he retreated, turning away, moving on to another conversation. The mask was cracked beyond repair, but still he clung to it. Months later, I saw Elaine at a mutual friend's wedding. She approached, a champagne flute trembling in her hand. "You look well," she said, eyes scanning me the way they always had, searching for flaws. "Perhaps a bit thin. Are you eating properly?" "I'm well, thank you." Her smile tightened. "This estrangement, it reflects poorly on the family. People are talking." "I'm not estranged," I replied calmly. "I'm protecting myself. Boundaries are conditions for closeness, not punishments." Her mask slipped for a second, bitterness flashing. "You always were difficult." "No," I corrected, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I was always clear. That clarity just didn't serve you." She blinked, then turned away, disappearing into the crowd. It was the last real conversation we ever had. Back at the cottage, I reclaimed Elise's legacy in my own way. The Vermont library was gone, but my shelves brimmed with books, sunlight spilling across them just as it once had at Lake Champlain. On weekends, I sat by the water, writing in my journal, the ripples carrying my reflections across the surface. Healing wasn't linear. Some nights, guilt whispered, old patterns tugged, memories resurfaced, but I had learned to meet them with compassion, not compliance. True family, I realized, is built on respect and care, not obligation and appearances. And true freedom comes not from running away, but from standing still and saying, no more. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I closed my journal and whispered the words that had once wounded me so deeply. You're lucky we even include you. But this time, I smiled, because I understood. They had included me out of pity. And by finally stepping away, I had included myself fully, fiercely, freely. Resolution, closing. The future stretched before me like the lake at dusk, uncertain, but open. Nathan continued his recovery, slowly building trust in measured steps. My parents clung to their masks, unwilling to face themselves. But me? I had chosen my family, Sophia, Jordan. The circle of friends who celebrated me not for what I provided, but for who I was. Freedom wasn't a grand gesture. It was the daily act of choosing myself. And as stars pricked the sky above New Hampshire, I knew one truth with absolute clarity. I was never difficult. I was simply free.